If there's any time throughout the year in which wicked legends truly come to life, it's during the season of Halloween. Here in America, this particular holiday is one of the most widely observed, and has been for many years. People young and old dress up in varying costumes to go out and celebrate in a variety of ways. Kids will flock to neighbors' houses looking for a sweet treat by means of trick-or-treating, while older revelers head for spooky-themed parties or other haunted gatherings. But other than that they are fun activities, have you ever wondered exactly why we continue to celebrate this holiday? Halloween's origins date back over 2,000 years ago, to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, when it was believed the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. The earliest traditions had people lighting bonfires and wearing costumes to ward off ghosts and other evil spirits. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated November 1st as a time to honor All Saints. Soon, All Saints' Day incorporated some of the traditions of Samhain, with the evening before becoming known as All Hallows' Eve, and later on, Halloween. In the time since, Halloween has transformed from a day to honor the dead to a day of fall festival traditions filled with parties and games, first hosted by colonial Americans. The silly pranks, party games, and costumes of the 1800s eventually evolved into the scarily popular event known as trick-or-treating beginning in the 1950s. Today, we may associate Halloween with these costume celebrations, delicious candy, or scary stories in movies. However, its history is much richer and darker, blending ancient pagan rituals with Celtic influences and other folk traditions from around the world. Here are 5 of the darkest and most wicked legends associated with the origins of Halloween. For this first tale, we've previously discussed some of the material utilized in a past video about Irish folklore. People have been making jack-o'-lanterns during Halloween for centuries, but have you ever wondered why these carved ghoulish gourds are used as lanterns and typically named after this Jack fellow? One version of this pumpkin practice may have originated from a 19th century Irish legend about a man nicknamed Stingy Jack. According to the story, Stingy Jack invited the devil to have a drink with him one evening. True to his name, Jack didn't want to pay for his drink, so he convinced the devil to turn himself into a coin that Jack could use to buy their drinks, and once paid, the devil would transform back. Once the devil transfigured though, Jack decided to keep the devil coin for himself and put it into his pocket next to a silver cross. This prevented the devil from changing back into his original form. Jack did eventually free the devil under the condition that he would not bother Jack for 1 full year. This meant that should Jack die, the devil could not claim his soul. The very next year, Jack again tricked the devil, this time into climbing up a tree to pick a particular piece of fruit. While he was up there, Jack carved a sign of the cross into the tree's bark, preventing him from coming down. Jack did not let the devil leave the tree until he promised Jack not to bother him for 10 additional years. The devil reluctantly agreed. Soon after, Jack did die. As the legend goes, however, God would not allow such an unsavory figure into heaven. The devil, still upset by the tricks Jack had played on him, and keeping his word not to claim his soul, would not allow Jack into hell either. He banished Jack into the dark of the night, with only a burning coal to light his way. Jack ended up putting the coal into a carved-out turnip, and has been roaming the earth with it ever since. The Irish began to refer to this ghostly figure as Jack of the Lantern, and then simply Jack-o'-lantern. The Will-o'-the-Wisp, or Will-o'-wisp, mentioned in my Irish Myths video, is a mysterious light usually spotted in wooded or swampy areas at night. These strange orbs are often seen as occurring from natural causes, but other times are blamed on mischievous children lighting lanterns, or even Jack-o'-the-Lantern mindlessly wandering the dark night forever. Traditionally, in Ireland and Scotland, people began to make their own versions of Jack's lanterns by carving scary faces into turnips and placing them into windows or near doors to frighten away Stingy Jack and other wandering evil spirits. Immigrants from these countries brought their vegetable carving traditions with them when they came to the United States, helping change American pumpkin carving from a general autumn pastime to one uniquely associated with Halloween. The Great Depression was a time of great economic strain and social changes that affected many parts of American life, including Halloween. Even in the 1920s and 30s, All Hallows' Eve had long been a night of revelry for adults and children alike, mostly seen as a positive outlet for young men to blow off steam. This ranged from stealing neighbors' gates off their hinges to stealing real dead bodies. However, there were plenty of people who didn't see this as harmless fun especially not now during such a tough time. The economic disaster only exacerbated young men's Halloween antics, however, leading to increased public concern and anger. In 1933, parents were outraged when hundreds of teenage boys flipped over cars, sawed off telephone poles, and engaged in other acts of vandalism across the country. People began to refer to this year's holiday as Black Halloween, similarly to the way they referred to the stock market crash 4 years earlier as Black Tuesday. At this point, some cities considered banning Halloween altogether, yet in many communities this was not wanted. Instead, the response was to organize Halloween activities for young people so that they didn't feel the need to run amok. It is during this time, over the next few years, in which organized Halloween endeavors began to emerge throughout America. Things that are now seen as classic Halloween traditions, such as trick-or-treating, parties, costume parades, and haunted houses, were constructed and utilized to keep young people busy. Given the lack of novelty items at the time, as well as the financial turmoil many families were faced with, decorations often needed to be improvised for the new haunted attraction idea. Old furs brushing against your skin, stripes of raw liver hung on walls, wet sponges and stringy hair nets hanging from ceilings. These are just a few examples of some of the items utilized for one attraction known as the Dark Tunnel, in which people would crawl through a long, cramped tube blindly in pitch black. During the early 20th century, public haunted attractions already had some notoriety in Europe. There was Marie Tussauds Wax Museum in London, featuring a chamber of horrors with many scary features, including decapitated fingers from the French Revolution. In 1915, a British amusement ride manufacturer created an early haunted house, complete with dim lights, shaking floors, and demonic screams. However, when it comes to these early American haunted houses, they were small, non-profit affairs held mostly in residential neighborhoods. As time passed, larger organizations began to host their own haunted houses as fundraisers or commercial attractions. The most famous and influential one was Disneyland's Haunted Mansion in 1969, which had an extremely high production value for its day and remains incredibly popular now. America's haunted attractions have become more and more elaborate as time and technology progresses. According to American Haunts, it is estimated that there are now over 1,200 public haunted attractions in which people pay good money to see and be frightened by. But during the Great Depression, there were only those small-scale haunts in American neighborhoods that parents put on for free, using their own homes, yards, and imaginations. Parents and other adults weren't the only ones who came up with ways to entertain young people during Halloween. Especially during the 1970s, popular culture had also begun to weed its way into the season with a plethora of haunting games. From using Ouija boards with your friends to summon spirits, to playing light as a feather, stiff as a board, to see if you can lift one of your, quote, dead friends off the ground, people, especially teenagers, found plenty of ways to keep themselves entertained on this ghoulish night. One such game is commonly known as Bloody Mary, and has one person or group of people entertaining a dark, dimly lit room, typically a bathroom with easy access to a mirror. They would then ritualistically chant the name Bloody Mary a specific number of times, usually 3 or 13, while staring directly into that mirror. Afterwards, an apparition is said to appear in the mirror's reflection as either a corpse, witch, or a ghost that could be friendly, sinister, or even an evil demonic spirit, while also sometimes being seen covered in blood, hence the name. Regarding what happens next, there are a number of varying outcomes. The lore surrounding the ritual states that participants may endure the apparition screaming at them, cursing them, strangling them, drinking their blood, scratching their eyes out, or even going so far as to steal their soul. But just like any of these legends, this game had to have originated from somewhere or something. Who is Bloody Mary, and why is the game played on Halloween? According to Joseph Stubbersfield in his online article regarding this very subject, Bloody Mary is thought to have evolved from much older mirror divination rituals. In a footnote to Robert Burns' 1786 poem Halloween, Burns described a mirror ritual used in Britain, typically by women, for the hopeful purpose of seeing the face of their future spouse. However, there were more negative connotations associated with this practice than positives, it seems. Many say there was also a chance that they would see a skull, or even the face of the Grim Reaper instead, indicating that they were going to die before they would even have a chance to marry. It was also said during the 19th century that if you stared into a mirror for too long, the devil would appear and steal your soul. These dark outcomes didn't deter most, though, as this concept continued well into the 20th century through European folklore. Halloween greeting cards were often produced with pictures of this particular ritual, leading to even more trying it out. It was not for a very long time, however, that examples of the Bloody Mary legends were first published in print. Outside of any oral tradition, the association of this particular individual didn't become relevant until she was first mentioned in an anthology of American children's folklore in 1976, and then within an academic writing on the subject by Janet Longloy in 1978. This supernatural entity called Mary is most frequently linked to that of varying historical figures whose first names they share. Mary, Queen of Scots, or Queen Mary I of England and Ireland, who was nicknamed Bloody Mary by Protestants in the 16th century, are two of the biggest. Furthermore, she is often linked to beings outside of Europe, such as the Bell Witch, a regional variation specific to Tennessee, USA, and being depicted as the ghost La Llorona, a Hispanic folk legend about the vengeful spirit of a woman who commits unspeakable acts after discovering her lover had been unfaithful to her. Regardless of her origins, Bloody Mary's backstory often involves being the victim of extreme violence, and playing games with that violence through dark spirits, especially when the veil of the afterworld is known to be at its thinnest on Halloween night, is scary in itself. There are a number of creatures and figures associated with Halloween. One of the most iconic comes in the form of the witch. In accordance with the holiday, the vast majority of witches have appeared in sinister ways, from evil, wart-nosed women huddling over a cauldron of boiling liquid, to green, hag-faced, cackling beings riding through the sky on brooms wearing pointy hats. In reality, however, early witches were people who practiced using magic spells and calling upon the spirits for help or to bring about some change. The word witch comes from the Old English version, witche, which means wise woman. In fact, Wiccan were highly respected people at one time. The idea of witches being perceived as evil beings derives from early Christians in Europe claiming they were pagans doing the devil's work. Many, however, were simply natural healers whose choice of profession was simply misunderstood. It's unclear exactly when witches were first mentioned in history, but one of the earliest records of a witch is in the Bible in the Book of Samuel, thought to be written between 931 and 721 BC. It tells the story of when King Saul sought the witch of Endor to summon the dead prophet Samuel's spirit to help him defeat the Philistine army. The witch roused Samuel, who then prophesied the death of Saul and his sons. The next day, according to the Bible, Saul's sons died in battle, and Saul committed suicide. Other Old Testament verses condemn witches, such as the oft-cited Exodus 22:18, which says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Additional biblical passages caution against divination, chanting, or using witches to contact the dead. Witch hysteria really took hold of Europeans during the mid-1400s, when many accused witches confessed, often under torture, to a variety of wicked behaviors. Within a century, witch hunts were common, and most of the accused were executed by burning at the stake or hanging. Between the years 1500 and 1660, up to 80,000 suspected witches were put to death in Europe. Around 80% of them were women, thought to be devil worshippers and filled with lust. As witch hysteria decreased in Europe, it grew in the New World, which was reeling from wars between the French and the British, a smallpox epidemic, and the ongoing fear of attacks from neighboring Native American tribes. The tense atmosphere was ripe for finding scapegoats. Probably the best-known witch trials took place in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. The Salem witch trials began when 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams began suffering from fits, body contortions, and uncontrolled screaming. Today, it is believed that they were poisoned by a fungus that caused spasms and delusions. As more young women began to exhibit symptoms, mass hysteria ensued, and 3 women were accused of witchcraft: Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba, an enslaved woman owned by Paris's father. Tituba confessed to being a witch and began accusing others of using black magic as well. On June 10th, Bridget Bishop became the first accused witch to be put to death during the Salem witch trials when she was hanged at the Salem gallows. Ultimately, around 150 people were accused and 18 were put to death. Single women, widows, and other women on the margins of society were especially targeted. However, women weren't the only victims of the Salem witch trials. 6 men were also convicted and executed. Modern-day witches of the Western world still struggle to shake their historical stereotype. Many practice Wicca, an official religion in the United States and Canada. Wiccans avoid evil and the appearance of evil at all costs. Their motto is to harm none, and they strive to live a peaceful, tolerant, and balanced life in tune with nature and humanity. Many modern-day witches still perform witchcraft, but there's seldom anything sinister about it. Their spells and incantations are often derived from their Book of Shadows, a 20th century collection of wisdom and witchcraft, and can be compared to the act of prayer in other religions. A modern-day witchcraft potion is more likely to be an herbal remedy for the flu instead of a hex to harm someone. Today's witchcraft spells are usually used to stop someone from doing evil or harming themselves. Ironically, while it's probable some historical witches used witchcraft for evil purposes, many may have embraced it for the healing or protection against the immorality they were accused of. But witches, whether actual or accused, still face persecution and death to this day. Several men and women suspected of using witchcraft have been beaten and killed in Papua New Guinea since 2010, including a young mother who was burned alive. Similar episodes of violence against people accused of being witches have occurred in Africa, South America, the Middle East, and in immigrant communities in Europe and the United States. There are multiple other examples of holidays, celebrations, and rituals associated with the aforementioned concept of the thinning of the veil between our world and the spirit realm. The Day of the Dead, or El Dia de los Muertos, is a Mexican holiday celebrated each year from October 31st to November 2nd, where families welcome back the souls of their deceased relatives for a brief yearly reunion. Including a blend of Mesoamerican rituals, European religion, and Spanish culture, the holiday is largely seen as having very festive characteristics, including various foods, drinks, and celebrations of music and dancing. While October 31st is still Halloween, November 1st and 2nd are reserved as All Souls' Day and the Day of the Dead, respectively. According to tradition, the gates of heaven are opened at midnight on October 31st, and the spirits of children can rejoin their families for 24 hours. The spirits of adults can do the same on November 2nd. The roots of the Day of the Dead go back some 3,000 years to the rituals honoring the dead in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. The Aztecs and other Nahua people living in what is now central Mexico held a cyclical view of the universe and saw death as an integral, ever-present part of life. Upon dying, a person was believed to travel to Chikunamictlan, the land of the dead. Only after getting through 9 challenging levels, a journey of several years, could the person's soul finally reach Mictlan, the final resting place. In Nahua rituals honoring the dead, family members provided food, water, and various tools to aid the deceased in their difficult journey. This inspired the contemporary Day of the Dead practice, in which people leave food or other offerings on the loved ones' graves, or set them out on makeshift altars called ofrendas in their homes. In ancient Europe, pagan celebrations of the dead also took place in the fall, and also consisted of dancing and feasting. However, another integral aspect of those celebrations was the use of bonfires. Around 2,000 years ago, during the pre-Halloween celebration of Samhain, bonfires were lit to ensure the sun would return after the long, harsh winter. Often, Celtic druid priests would throw the bones of cattle and other animals into the giant flames, thus creating literal fires of bone, which is where the word bonfire or bonfire derives from. Some ancient Samhain customs survived even after the rise of the Roman Catholic Church, which unofficially adopted them into their celebrations of 2 Catholic holidays, All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, celebrated on the first 2 days of November as well. For example, in medieval Spain, people would bring wine and pan de animas, or spirit bread, to the graves of their loved ones on All Souls' Day. They would also cover graves with flowers and light candles to illuminate the dead souls' way back to their homes on Earth. In the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors brought such traditions with them to the New World, along with a darker view of death influenced by the devastation of the bubonic plague. Though the particular customs and scale of All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, and the Day of the Dead celebrations continue to evolve, the heart of each holiday has remained the same over thousands of years. They're known as occasions for remembering and celebrating those who have passed on from this world, while at the same time portraying death in a more positive light, as a natural part of the human experience. These 5 topics discussed brush upon many of the varying aspects of what makes Halloween a true folk holiday. The date of October 31st doesn't mark a particular anniversary of something to celebrate or remember. Granted, it is next door to a religious holiday, but it isn't one itself. The origins of Samhain are truly a bewildering collection of historical practices knitted together like a big, scary cultural sweater, partially from mixes of ancient traditions, religious rites, folk practices, and other more modern sources. Regardless, Halloween remains as one of the most imaginative and inventive holidays to commemorate, with an incredibly rich and dark history filled with some particularly wicked legends to discuss.